It's not often I get the privilege of speaking to three experts simultaneously, but that is kind of what we get to do this afternoon. I hope you all will take those titles of experts with the levity that I intend them. Because expertise, I think, in this space is something that feels a dangerous term. I think we all would love to say that we're experts in these things, but the space is changing at a pace that is hard to reconcile with, I think, for many. And particularly across the media landscape, we have got an awful lot of challenges, don't we, that we need to contend with. So let me give you a little bit of an introduction of who we have with us. To my left is Jeffrey Bennett. He is the General Counsel of SAG-AFTRA, an acronym that I can neither pronounce nor explain what it stands for, but maybe you can do that for me in a minute, Jeffrey. Right. But I'm sure many of you will be familiar with the Hollywood actors' strike that happened over the past year or so. We may get into some of that as we go, but I'm sure he will give us more information. In the centre, I have Jessica Davis, who is the VP of News Automation at Gannett Media. For many of you will know USA Today amongst their many other publications across the country. Jessica has been doing a lot of work building ethical AI frameworks and working with the ethics of AI in the news media. And to my far left is Beth Cantor, who's the Chief Advocacy Officer for Omidyar Network, who are working at the intersection of media and ethics, and I think we were going to have a fascinating conversation. Now, as with all the good panels, we have prepared, well, at least if you've been to some good panels today, they're probably the ones that prepared. But preparing for a conversation like this is quite difficult, I would say, because things change all the time and on a daily basis. So we've got some kind of general topics, but I would love it if you've got questions. You can submit them on the Hoover app, so please do that in the session. But we'll also take some time to take some questions from the floor at the end. But maybe let's kick off, and perhaps I'll start first of all by just kind of going down the line and just getting each of our panelists just give a brief introduction of what they do at their organizations. And Jeffrey, I'll come to you first.
All right, thank you. I appreciate the expert designation. I'm an expert in the acronym SAG-AFTRA. That is Screen Actors Guild, American Federation of Radio and Television Artists. That is the culmination of a merger between SAG and AFTRA. Both of those organizations have been around since about 1930. And today, SAG-AFTRA represents about 160,000 actors, broadcasters, sound recording artists, and everything in between, singers, dancers, stunt performers, etc. I am by no means an expert in AI, but I am learning as fast as I can about how it's impacting our industry. And I've probably spent the last 2 years dealing with the intersection of AI and our world. If you look at our website, it says that we are the faces and voices that entertain and inform the world. AI can replicate faces and voices, so our work has been cut out for us.
Yes, a challenge that we're definitely going to dig into for sure. Jessica, do you want to just give us a brief introduction to yourself?
Yeah, I'm so happy to be here. Gannett, I really work really closely heading up our AI product and news automation, so working very closely with our journalists. We have a policy that's over a year old where we require human in the loop. So you'll hear me talking a lot about, okay, if there are risks in AI, how do we make sure we seize the opportunity in safe and responsible ways? And that's my second hat at Gannett, is I'm responsible, a co-chair of our AI Council, and that's our AI governance across our organization. So I work not just with the journalists on that, but across all of the company. And we're a large company. Usually, every month, 1 in 2 households in the U.S. is touching one of our products. So we're really from coast to coast and informing the nation. And beyond USA Today, some of our titles include the Tennessean in Nashville, Tennessee, the Detroit Free Press, the Arizona Republic, and with the election next week, it won't be dull.
No, I don't think it's going to be dull, and we can talk about whether or not, kind of AI Trump and AI Kamala are going to kind of come and feature in our news very soon as well. Okay, and then I think it's also helpful to us to understand the kind of the intersection here with the policy side of things as well. Beth, why don't you give us an introduction to what you do at Omidyar?
Thank you, and I'm so delighted to be here. Again, I'm Beth Cantor. I'm the Chief Advocacy and Strategic Communications Officer at Omidyar Network. And for those of you who might not be familiar with Omidyar Network, we are a philanthropic organization that our vision is really that our shared humanity steers and shapes digital technology. We are laser focused on digital technology, and that's somewhat new for us. We're coming into that on the heels of a strategy refresh for the past 5 years. That has been responsible technology has been one core pillar of our work. But in addition to that, economic issues around what we call reimagining capitalism, also building cultures of belonging. We are taking those that grounding and that foundational infrastructure that we have built and everything that we have learned, and steering and directing that in towards technology, because our new mission is to bend the arc of the digital revolution toward shared power, prosperity, and possibility.
Power, prosperity, and possibility. 3 words, I think.
Small things, right?
Small things, yeah. Small ambitions here. Things that we're probably going to dig into further. You started us off, Jeff, by talking about the fact that you protect the faces and voices, and faces and voices can be replicated. I had a conversation with a talent agent a few weeks ago who talked to me about signing 6-figure talent deals with virtual influencers. Not just deep fakes of people that exist or replications of our famous celebrity voice actors or those working in the media, but entirely synthetically generated influencers, people who have no original content or origin. And these are the influencers that are doing these kind of major deals. How are we to think about signing and protecting, if we can even protect the rights of that type of talent in the future versus protecting the rights of those that have been born?
You're asking me, your very first question to me is asking me how I feel about synthetic influencers or synthetic performers. I think negatively about that. Like
I said, we prepared. I didn't say I wasn't provocative. Just to be clear.
Well, so there's a lot of ways to think about that. I do want to say, we have been so hyper-focused on like the immediate threat. There was an immediate threat in our world, and that was cloning and replication of famous voices, famous people in some cases, not always famous people. You've all seen the stories out there of people that have been replicated in local high schools, for example, like people making fun of each other, sexualized deepfakes. It's all the same thing. It all relates to cloning. So we have worked very hard in the last 2 years at the state level and the federal level to shore up those voice and likeness protections. They exist. It's not a new thing. Voice and likeness protection's been around for about 100 years, but it's sort of a patchwork of protections. And so we've really worked hard to strengthen those. We introduced, along with the studios and the broadcasters and the record labels, and there were some tech companies involved, the No Fakes Act, trying to nail down protections in voice and likeness so that people can at least protect themselves from being replicated, commercial misappropriation, performance replacement, sexual deepfakes, those kind of things. The other issue is the synthetic issue. That is the more challenging issue. There's a lot of things that go into that. The first thing that I would think when I see a synthetic content, whether it's a synthetic performer or it's audiovisual, I'd say, okay, well, how was the machine trained that made that content, right? What's the training data? Is it all human performance? Who were the humans that performed? Were they given the ability to consent to that system training on their performances, their likenesses? Even though it's not replicating a likeness, these things have to train, and they're training on human created material. So, obviously the biggest issue in the world right now when it comes to intellectual property and AI is the 34 pending copyright lawsuits against these systems. We're trying to plan for a world where either outcome could be the case, right? They're going to say infringement, in which case, I don't know, they're going to have to undo everything they did and start all over. I don't know. But they'll do it. They have the money. They have the power. It's going to happen anyway. Or it's fair use, in which case we have to live with the fact that they may be able to train on all of this stuff and create what would be synthetic material. Synthetic material is, I hope, never as compelling, I hope, as human created material. I hope that people, and maybe this is my age, right? I hope that people like me read a book, hear a song, watch a movie, love it, and think, who is that director? Who are these actors? Who wrote this book? A human connection, right? Because it's interesting, it's compelling to know that a human did that, as opposed to everything's done by a machine. You're going to be like, is that as interesting? I don't think so.
Beth, I can see you nodding along there. I mean, how do you feel about this idea that we may have a competition in a market with an unlimited upward trajectory in terms of the amount of synthetic characters that could be out there competing for that?
Yeah,
content opportunity?
I mean, I was nodding for so many reasons because so much of the work that Jeffrey and SAG-AFTRA have done have been at the cutting edge of so many of the issues that we need to be contending with. And I really think that this is about ethically deploying AI-generated talent or any other type of AI tool as we think about it. It's, for me and for Omidyar Network, it's a question of how it boosts humanity and how it benefits society. And that's what we always want to be thinking about first. And, you know, it's a question of, are we using this talent to sell movies or Instagram products at the expense of actors and creators, or is it being used as a tool to augment human creativity and create new jobs and opportunities for folks who might be left out? And so I consider that to be far more ethical and, quite frankly, to that point, Jeffrey, far more engaging for audiences and for all of us than the first. And I truly do hope and believe that it is the human creativity that is going to keep all of us not replaced by the synthetic versions of us.
Yeah. Well, and one of the areas, obviously, aside from the more entertainment sphere, where we've seen many of these use cases become, quite prevalent, when it comes to particularly news and thinking about content generation in that space, aside from the pending cases, and obviously we see where that lies, we are seeing an awful lot of opportunity that these tools are creating in terms of efficiency and time saving. And Jessica, I know you guys have been thinking about this at Gannett in terms of how that not only comes into the newsroom to assist real journalists and real talent in various different settings, but also in terms of what it could mean for the change in the way that we as customers and consumers engage with content. Just talk to us a little bit about how you're thinking about this and where do you even start with a framework of how to think about this?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a couple things here. It is assistive. It augments and enhances. When you actually try these tools, they have limitations and risks in them that they make information up. And for a news organization where trust is just so critical to our business, to the service we do, to the communities we serve, if we're one of our local communities, our local papers, or all the way right to the nation with USA Today, trust is so important. And so when we're looking at using these tools, and they might make things up, we need to put guardrails around that. So the first thing we did is we created journalistic guidelines in April of 2023. We've revised them several times. It's not a one and done, right? These things are evolving. Change is our constant for this space. And then secondly, we rolled out all employee guidelines to make sure that we did a fast follow of, okay, our journalists aren't the only people in our organization to benefit from these tools, but we need to give them guardrails as well, so they can be confident in the use, that it adds value to their role and to their work. And so a couple of the projects that we did, I'll talk about one of them where we really felt like we took into consideration what is it that our journalists need to feel really good about this, that it is additive, it adds value. And what about our readers, our audience, our users? What do they think about this? So we learned a couple of things when we did our research. First off, we looked at the space. What are the irksome areas? Where are people annoyed? Where do we have opportunity? And we found that people were inconsistent in including the summaries at the top of stories. They said it took too much time. And so we said, okay, can we do this summary at the top? So we created the tool that it doesn't automatically publish. It gives the journalists a draft. They can review it and make any changes they want to it to ensure accuracy, that it's the right tone, and that it adds value to their article. We heard from our journalists, I'm worried the readers will read the summary and not my story. So let's flip over to the user side. The users were very skeptical of AI. Why? Well, their experience with AI, often, not everyone has used ChatGPT in the world. It was movies, sci-fi. So that's either your AI friend companion, positive, or it's the dominating force that's going to take over the world and exterminate us. So this is a scary thing for them, or an uncertain thing. And what we learned in our research is that our users trusted our journalists more than AI. And so when we deployed, we carefully watched these things, and the feedback that we got from our journalists, this is easy to use. It's accurate, right? This helps us. What do we learn from our users? It increased engaged time on stories. It gave people a taste of what was to come and invited them to come deeper with us. So on average, articles that included this did see that boost. So we're really encouraged by this, and it has to have that dual benefit. Otherwise, why are you doing it?
The pressure in the newsroom at the moment to be a multimedia organisation is never been higher, and we're seeing news organisations and broader entertainment companies trying to do mixed media in all different formats. Every journalist now needs to be able to. Well, I don't think we necessarily need more podcasts, but every journalist seems to have one, and certainly we're seeing AI voices being used to synthetically read articles that previously would have only ever existed in text, that maybe no one would have ever actually gone out to find a voice actor to voice every article that sits across the pages. And so I wonder whether or not, particularly maybe Jeffrey, from your kind of view, could there be an opportunity in some of these new mediums where new types of licensing of voices of those that maybe would never have considered themselves to be an on-air talent or other things could exist, and it could be a positive. It doesn't always just have to be a threat.
Yes, absolutely. And we have leaned into the opportunities. We recognize, we've talked to companies that do, and I can give you some examples of companies that are doing things that I would consider enhancement or augmentation of the creative process or opening new opportunities. There are companies that can take dubbing, for example, that can use the actual original actor's voice and dub that into as many different languages as you want. Not only that, but they can modify the mouth so that the mouth is speaking in those different languages. It's remarkable. Like, for those of you that don't like subtitles, this is your dream come true. You don't have to worry about those anymore. It looks amazing. That is something that's going to start rolling out. I love that as an enhancement. There's still humans involved. It opens up the marketplace for the movie. That's great. And anybody really that is interested in, we've seen this with podcasters who want to do their podcast in different languages. It can be their voice in those different languages thanks to AI. But so we're encouraged by that. There's another company that we just did a deal with called Narrative. It's an online platform. Brands can go on the platform, find a voice that they want. These are human voices, but you use digital versions of the voice. The human doesn't do any work at all. If you like the sound of the voice, you send the script. It's read. The performer hears it and either approves it or says no to it, and we set the rates so that the rates are fair. That's typical union role, right? Make sure that everybody's getting paid fairly. Make sure that they have that consent built in. So we're fully embracing these opportunities that AI is presenting. But the one area that to me is still sort of an open question, and there have been deals in the news that you guys may have seen. Disney, it was announced that Disney's doing something with AI. Lionsgate is working with Runway, right? Go look at Runway. Look at their website and look what they can do. And most recently, Universal Music Group. So we were on the phone with the general counsels of those companies the day after that we read those and say, we just want to talk about what you're doing. We want to get ahead of the messaging here. And we want to see the ways in which you're going to augment and enhance production. Because when you look at what these things can do, unfortunately, all you see is like a finished end product.
Yes.
Right? You're not seeing there's not an intuitive tool that that's built in there. You're just seeing an end product. So I'm very hopeful, but I'm a little skeptical that there's going to be tools built into these things that seem to just be built to generate a finished product.
Yes, and there's somewhat of a journalistic kind of a pride, I think, taken in showing you're working out. It's a little bit like when you do a maths puzzle at school. You get extra points, right, for showing you're working out, not just jumping to the end conclusion, which I think we're talking about. And there is that challenge, I think, as we think about producing the content, that the artifacts that get produced around the content that ends up on our screens somewhat is lost in that creative process. We are seeing that it isn't always necessarily the final edit that is the thing that shapes the way that people think about something. It's all of the Twitterati, it's the commentary that goes around it, it is the other assets that help shape the discourse. And I just wonder, as we kind of come into land, that maybe we should think a little bit about how some of this type of content that is being produced by AI, and when we have such a plethora of it, may begin to change the way in which discourse is shaped and all the way through to public policy. I mean, within recent months, we thought that AI will never be able to do as good a job as two podcasters can in having a conversation. I don't know how many of you have listened to a Notebook LM generated podcast in recent weeks, but I think think the idea that AI won't ever be able to do X is a statement that we're going to very soon do away with. Beth, how should we think about this? Should we be worried that AI could begin to shape the way that we think about these big topics?
I want to actually take us a step back for a second to dig a little bit deeper into what you and Jeffrey were both saying. Digging under the hood a little bit about the process, I think that is really critically important, not just from the perspective of actors and writers and creatives, but for all of the people, all of the workers who are going to be impacted. I think the more that workers actually understand this technology, the more they're going to be able to understand how it can be used as augmenting their jobs. And so, we are, the folks who are protected by labor unions, unfortunately, is a very small percentage of the American workforce. And so many of us do not have the protections of union contracts. And so many folks are going to be impacted by generative AI rolling out in the workplace. And those are the people who really need to understand the technology and to have a voice in how it is deployed. I just read a recent study that between 13 and 18 million clerical workers will potentially be displaced. Those are typically not folks who are represented by traditional labor unions. They are traditionally women, a lot of women of color. They are folks who are just knocking on the door of the middle class, who have reliable schedules, who can take their kids to the doctor, who can take care of their parents when they need that. And those are the folks who we also need to be thinking about how their lives are really going to be impacted. And they need to understand this technology in ways so that they can be a part of how it is rolled out in their workplaces, so that they can really understand how they can use it to their advantage, so that they can do even the higher and better skilled things that only humans are capable of doing, and that it's not just about job replacement. The other thing, I just want to go back to what Jessica was saying, that I think is so critically important that AI can't do and that only humans can do, is that deep reporting. The deep storytelling that only happens when reporters are on the ground talking to real people and really digging deep. I think AI is incredibly useful for exactly what you were talking about. The summarizing, the getting the data, all of the legwork that traditionally, that's not a great use of really talented reporters' time. But what it can't do is have the really deep conversation that can bring a story to life, that can help change hearts and minds. And that's what I think good journalism can do.
Yeah, maybe we should pull on that thread a little. And one of the big things that we're seeing is that people are worried about job. How many of you are worried that your job could be done by a relatively sophisticated artificial intelligence? Interesting. Okay, you think you have very good job
Y'all
security.
are lucky in this room.
Yeah, maybe that's because all of you are advanced enough in your careers to be at a conference to talk about this stuff. And I say that slightly in jest, but actually it has a kind of important point, because I wonder, we see that, if you wanted to start, if I had to restart my job in an advertising career 20 years ago, or as a, kind of junior counselor, or you were starting out in the world of journalism, or you were going to be a policy researcher, the work that we tend to give those people today, those most junior roles as they enter from the graduate workforce, I would tend to, this may be a Britishism, we call that the dog's body kind of work, or the grunt work we often give those people. When that work is most logically replaced by AI and there's no economic argument for it to be done any other way, how will you all have the next generation of you doing your jobs? Do you worry about that?
Yes, I do worry about that. And matter of fact, we're actually seeing it. There are already instances in our world where we're seeing job replacement. We don't like to highlight it, we don't like to talk about it, but it absolutely is happening. They're jobs that you wouldn't think people had, frankly. When you think about, I don't know, I'll give you an example of a commercial. Think about a pharmaceutical commercial, right? Usually have some actors, and they go from being depressed to being super happy because they took a pill, right?
Or Ozempic, I think.
Yeah, like if you didn't if there was no words, if you were just watching, you'd be like, well, I don't know what that pill is. I want to take that pill. But then at the end of the commercial, you've got a voice that reads really fast. Those used to be humans. Humans used to do that. They had that skill, right? That's the kind of thing where, AI can probably do that much cheaper and much faster. That's a problem. But to think there's not going to be any displacement is wrong. There's absolutely going to be displacement. I do think people need to learn how to use it. I encourage my legal team to use it. To me, it's similar to when and I'm old enough to have gone through so many technological revolutions, and I remember them all very well. I remember the first person, somebody came into my office and said, I need to show you this thing called Google. And there's the bar, and they're like, watch, and they type it in. You all have to admit, I assume, that you got better when you started using Google. You got better. You got better at like how to get the information you needed by what you asked. It's the same thing with ChatGPT. It's the same thing with these AI systems. The better you are at interacting with it, you can get your answers faster. And if it's all just everybody working faster and everybody being more efficient, I'm great. That's great, right? That's not too much job displacement. That's just everybody being more productive. That's the optimist in me saying that, yes, there's hope for that. And I encourage my team to do that because I've already done projects using ChatGPT for the mundane lookup type stuff that would have taken me an hour that take me now 10 minutes. So I think that's there.
As general counsel, do you charge the same hourly rate for that 10 minutes? Or?
As general counsel, I do not charge an hourly rate. So, but I think the people that are out there working under billable hour systems are going to have to think about that because we know now you can do that faster.
That's right. That's right. And can we do it as well, Jessica? Will those young journalists, those budding entrepreneurs that want to go out onto the beat, they're going to be able to do it as well? We're going to have jobs for them.
Yeah, I think it forces us to rethink how we brought in the cub reporters, where they did do some of that work to cut their teeth and learn, their beat. And I think that's an opportunity. There's a lot of opportunity here. I think the education gap is so crucial here and worth a lot of conversation around who knows what in organizations. There's a study that just came out that said, we're just still very early on organizations catching up on preparing the workforce. 3 in 10 employees say their organization have guidelines, so that's a great starting point. Most orgs have yet to prioritize training for AI. It's all over the place there. But the positive story here, employees who took training, 89% of those were more likely to say they had a positive view that AI could have a good impact on their productivity and efficiency at work. So just seeing what's possible by using the tools, absolutely. Don't get left behind. Don't let all the fear and uncertainty about, will this replace me? Instead, embracing what's possible. What's possible for me?
I think I'm going to give the opportunities. We have a few moments just to kind of go to the floor. So does anyone have any questions in the room that they want to ask? Yes, down the front. Just use a loud voice and I'll repeat it back. Go for it. I'll repeat your question back. Yeah. Do you want to take that?
Yeah. No, what's interesting is, obviously.
Sorry, can you repeat the question back? Well, I'll repeat the question back, which is that even the generation of these synthetic voices still have someone involved in them, whether that's a developer generating them or the original voice actor that may have trained those voices. So at what point, if I understand you right, is it kind of enough humans in the loop for it to be justifiable? So yes. Yeah.
That's an excellent question, and I have to start obviously by sort of admitting my obvious bias, right? My obvious bias is I represent professional performers, right? So I represent the very people that are in danger of being replaced by a synthetic performer, even though that synthetic performer had jobs behind it creating that synthetic performance. So it is true. I think, I kind of think about it this way. We have met with a lot of AI companies, and I'm fascinated by what they're doing. I love reading articles about AI being used to help the CEO of Google DeepMind win a Nobel Prize in chemistry. Like when I think about AI, that's what I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the opportunity to have those types of like scientific breakthroughs, not necessarily AI used to create what normally would be created by humans and are jobs that humans love. Like humans love creating, acting, performing. These aren't jobs that need to be replaced because nobody wants to do them. These are jobs that people love. So I'm a little discouraged when I see companies like OpenAI who have spent tons and tons of money, have all that computing power, brilliant researchers who all have jobs that are doing this, and I respect that. But then they come out with something like a Toys R Us ad. Like I'm sure you've all seen Sora. One of the things Sora did, and I'm like, all the talk about AI and the promise and the progress and the breakthroughs, and you make a Toys R Us ad. That's what you want to do with this technology. But the workers, to their credit, I've met with some of the people at the AI companies that do the work, not the policy people, not the lawyers, the actual people that I wish I could be as smart as these people, right? Hearing them talk about what they do it's not like the conversations we're having. It's how do I make the next breakthrough? How do I use the algorithms and the data and the right combination of all of this to get the next breakthrough in whether it's a human performance or the audiovisual look that they're going for, whatever it is. So there is real human effort and work going into these things. What scared me a little is they're so focused, laser focused on that next technological breakthrough. I don't know if they're taking a step back and having conversations about the impact it's going to have on society as a whole, on creative workers, on whatever the case may be. So that's a tough question.
Beth, just to throw that down to you as well, is there work that needs to be done or is already being done in the policy space to kind of help us sort through this question of how much human in the loop makes it justifiable?
Yes and no. is the complicated answer. All of this technology is moving so quickly, and unfortunately, I think faster than the speed of how policymakers are able to get in front. What we do know is that we need the safeguards and the guardrails to really be thoughtful about how this incredible technology is deployed so that it can do those wondrous things that make all of these breakthroughs possible, and probably a little bit less Toys R Us ads and a little bit more scientific breakthroughs that are going to solve some of our most pressing opportunities of this time that can really help us advance our society. And again, for us, it is all about how is this technology being used in service of our shared humanity and society and not the other way around.
Fantastic. I'll take one question from Susan because she's my colleague. So for the rest of the room, the question was, we're in this weird limbo period at the moment. The cases haven't been settled. There may be repercussions to come. Any advice for those that are trying to operate in the middle?
So two incredibly difficult questions. Good questions, right? There are 34 cases. There is a website that tracks these cases. If you're interested, it's called ChatGPT is Eating the World. I didn't name it. But it tracks all the developments of all 34 copyright infringement cases. It's possible that we get a decision on the question of infringement versus fair use, which is the question, that is the question, in December, the Thomson Reuters case. There's a possibility. However, given the process with these cases, that's not going to be the be all end all. That's not going to be our answer, right? These cases very well are all going to go to the Supreme Court, which means we have a long time before we work this out. And so I think it's interesting to look at what some of the bigger companies that can afford to either get hit with the damages, lose these lawsuits, and still survive, what are they doing? What is OpenAI doing? They're licensing. They're like, let's just, to anybody that's willing, let's enter in an agreement, let's license, we have a lot of money. Rather than pay damages in a lawsuit, let's just pay the money to these companies to get their data. But, this is where my technical knowledge isn't as good as it should be, but I have a feeling there's more than just, here's our data, give me the money going on in these deals. Someone has to scrub that data, label that data, deal with all of the things that are in that data, and who knows it better than the company that's providing it, right? Also, I think that they're probably offering tools back to these companies, maybe exclusive type tools, that they can use in exchange for doing that deal. So there's probably a lot more going on than just, certainly I've learned by having the conversations with Lionsgate and Disney that seems to be what's going on. It's not just a deal for money data. It's much more complex than that. But how to handle this, be very careful, right? You certainly don't want to build a platform of AI-generated stuff for your business that ends up all being subject to copyright infringement or intellectual property violations, right? You don't want that to happen to you. So my guess would be work with the companies that are just licensing. Like, don't take the risk. Work with companies that are licensing the data, and when you deal with, if you're at a company that's going to do AI-related stuff, make sure that you're working with a company that has licensed its material, so you don't have to worry about it. Because there are companies that are doing that now. It's just safer.
It's just safer. 3 words which I wish that we could expand upon for another hour, and I would love to if we could. It feels like we are very much at the beginning of a moment, which has only just began to kind of show its face, I think, in this space. And there's a lot more to unpack, and we will do that at this event over the next couple of days and in subsequent ones. For now, would you give our fantastic panel a massive round of applause and thank them for their time and contribution? Thank you, guys. Thank you.